now.
Good afternoon. This is Scott Murray with our monthly security and compliance webcast focused on HLS. Welcome to everybody that's able to join us. Today I'm joined by Paul Jones, who is going to be talking about Azure Active Directory Conditional Access and a whole bunch of best practices and just various different things that we're seeing in the field today. So again, welcome. And Paul, if you want to do a quick introduction, and then we can go from there.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Paul Jones. I've been with Microsoft for a very long time. Glad to talk to you all about conditional access and best practices. You know, we get a lot of questions on, you know, which should be our baseline, what should we do for sensitive information, you know, and what are some of the key settings you have to have, should have, really good to have, things like that. And hopefully we could touch upon all of those. I do have a few slides, but mostly we'll be demoing. I'll just go through the console, stepping through how to create some of these policies, some of the tools that come along with the policies. How do you get your insight and reporting, diagnostics, and what if, and different things like that. And so hopefully it'll be an informative session. All right, with that, I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully I'll share the right screen. And now I do have a few slides to start with. So let me start those. Turn off the video just to save a little bandwidth. Okay. First of all, conditional access, you know, it falls under the Azure Active Directory and identity. And I already skipped the slide. Okay. So, you know, the challenges today, you know, I'm not going to read all the slides. I mean, you know, especially with COVID and everyone used to working from, you know, the office. Now you're required to work away from the office and things like that. So security has changed, you know, as more applications move to the cloud, as more people want to use their iPad, their Android phone, their Surface Book, whatever it is, to get work done. It's not so much, hey, I'm buying and building bigger and better firewalls. Now it's, you know, the identity is the control plane. That's where you have to start with. So in Azure Active Directory, this is somewhat of a marketing slide, but the one key thing is no one can compete with us when we talk about daily authentication requests. 30 billion plus daily authentication requests. We know what a good authentication looks like. We know what a bad authentication looks like. And, you know, we use our tools to make sure to help you protect your organization. But just remember, it's kind of like, you know, having a seatbelt in a car. You know, we give you these tools, but you got to put the seatbelt on. You have to click it to make sure that you're protected and so forth. And hopefully, you know, I could touch upon quite a bit of that today. You know, one of the key buzzwords floating around is zero trust. You know, so what is zero trust? Well, that means you trust no one. You know, you have to verify. You know, you only get access when you need it. And you assume that every step of the way, you know, there could be a breach. So we're going to look at your identities, your devices, you know, and then decide, you know, what data, which applications, infrastructure, network, you know, you're connecting to. And then make decisions. And most of those decisions are made with conditional access policies. So Microsoft Azure Active Directory. So how do we secure the world? You know, there's 4 key pillars here, and we're only going to talk about maybe 2 of them. Secure adaptive access, that's one of them, and seamless user experience. You know, those are kind of ones we'll focus on, mostly just the secure adaptive access today. You know, for this talk, and that's mostly where the conditional access piece kind of ties in. although we'll touch upon access governance, in our solution. So what is secure adaptive access? Multi-factor authentication. We want to look at, context-based and risk-based access policies. You just logged in from Louisiana and 50 minutes later, you're logging in from Japan. That's impossible travel. What's going on there? Entity behavior analytics also. Okay, you log in all the time on this machine from this location. Now something's changed. You logged in from a new machine, and that new machine is in the same location. Okay, now that new machine is in a different location. It's kind of constantly learning, your behavior so that it can make the correct steps to make sure that you are secure, through that. And one of the key things you'll hear us talk about is multi-factor authentication, and that's one of the key features in conditional access. And the goal is to make it as easy as possible. And so, you could use Microsoft Authenticator app. Probably the easiest one is Windows Hello, especially if you have one of the modern machines that have the camera or the fingerprint reader or even biometrics. We also support FIDO2 keys that you can use for that, and then the different ways to send those. We won't get in the different ways of sending, push or soft token, hard tokens, or anything like that, but just the key that, if you have MFA, that is the #1 key in protecting, I think, almost 100% of identity attacks, can be mitigated. I say almost, it's 99.9, for that.
This is Scott. A quick question for you, Paul. Do you remember off the top of your head? I don't. The percentage of customers that we still see having MFA enabled. I know it's low, but I always, whenever I see the number, I keep meaning to take it down because I do think it's impactful, just to show that folks really still aren't doing this real basic thing.
I don't know the number off the top of my hand, but it's, it's once again, it's the seatbelt. You can, it's key one. You got to enable, you got to put that seatbelt on when you get in the car. You have to have MFA, for that. And, that's a good one. I have to make a note and look. That's a good question. Look that one up.
I keep forgetting to write it down. I know it's single digits for our standard users. I think we might be closing on double digits for like global admin type accounts, which is terrible.
Yes, it's terrible. All right. So what are we protecting? In this new work from home. With Azure Active Directory, you could protect, your on-premise identities, your HR applications, your external identities, the devices, SaaS applications, cloud-hosted applications, and on-premise and web applications. And the engine behind that, and this is my last slide, is the conditional access. That we're getting the signals on who the user is, where are they located. Scott's in Minnesota. Okay, he's always in Minnesota. He's logging in from his house. He's on a Surface Book device, it's marked compliant, and he's accessing Outlook. Okay, everything's checking good. Then we might detect, we just found Scott's password on the dark web. That's going to raise a flag. We look at all these different signals and then determine, do we want to allow him, access? Or maybe Scott just got a brand new machine and he's logging in from a friend's house. Okay, well, maybe then we'll require MFA. All right, Scott, it's a little different here. Let's just send you a quick MFA just to make sure. Or we want to give you limit access. You can't download anything, or you can't cut, copy, paste. Or if you do download something, maybe we'll rights protect it. Or, as I said earlier, we detected on the dark web, we're forcing you to do a password reset. Or we could put this in monitor mode. Hey, here's a new policy I want to apply. Let's see what it does first before we enable that. And I'll kind of touch upon that. And then the decision is made, okay, now you can access the applications and the data and things like that. With that, I'm going to stop the presentation of slides. Now I'm going to just kind of play around in the console a little bit. I kind of started out, I have we'll kind of start with the baseline policies. I did block legacy authentication, and that was just key. You shouldn't have any application using legacy authentication anymore. The key here is under your client apps, you have to check, active sync clients and other clients. You click over here, it'll tell you, what are popular other clients, POP, IMAP, SMTP, and so forth. You could click on learn more and get more information. But on this one right here, all users, all cloud applications, we're going to set the block. That should not be using legacy offering. We have another one, require MFA for Azure management. And that's key also. When you want to use Azure management, that might include connecting to the Azure portal or using PowerShell or CLI, any of those different tools that you would use, an admin would use, you really want to require MFA for that. And so for the next one, and I'll actually kind of step through and create this one, is we'll do another baseline. And I just like using the word baseline. You could kind of create whatever you want or name them whatever you want, and MFA for administrators. When we start there, here we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do directory roles. And there's the key directory roles that Microsoft recommends, authentication administrators, billing administrators, conditional access administrators, exchange administrators, obviously global administrators. We'll do the help desk administrators, and let's see, security administrators, and then I think SharePoint and users. Okay, so those roles, we really want to make sure that MFA is set. It's we really want MFA for everyone, but it's not always as easy to turn that on for everyone. It is a change, it is an additional step and things like that. Maybe you don't have Windows Hello for Business already deployed, or end users would have to get the Authenticator app and things like that. They might have to go through a step to register for it. And so now with that, we could say go to our client applications, and then would apply all client apps. Or if you wanted to be specific, you could. And then we'll go down to grant, and we'll say require MFA. And so just to kind of step through again, administrators, and I'll post the link of the administrators we recommend that you do that for. All cloud apps, we want to require MFA. Now all of a sudden you see a little red box pop up here, and it's saying, okay, don't lock yourself out. We recommend applying a policy to a small set of users first, and then so forth. Now with that, we usually recommend you have a break glass account or emergency access account. And Scott, you want to kind of touch upon, what that is and why we need that and how we set that up?
Yeah. So what it really comes down to is that in the event of any kind of outage, let's say that you have, like federated identity or something like that, where, you can't always 100% guarantee that we're going to be able to access your on-prem, identity store, or if you're just trying to plan for, well, if somebody accidentally clicks the wrong thing inside of a conditional access policy, you need to have a break glass account that is, excluded from scope for a bunch of these protections. Now, there are additional things you want to do around this account just to make sure that it is, in fact, actually going to be available. First thing is, from an Azure Active Directory standpoint, it really should be an account that is born in the cloud. So really, it's going to end up with one of those .onmicrosoft.com addresses And that's okay, because this isn't an address or an account that your standard user is ever going to use. So it really is there just in case of an extreme emergency. The password should be fairly long, at least 16 characters in length is what we recommend. I say feel free to go as long as you want and as complex as you want. At the end of the day, this should not be necessarily a passphrase or anything like that. It should be randomly generated. And another thing that I see a lot of my customers do as well is they'll actually have multiple people generate fragments of this password, and then those fragments will be stored individually. So no one person will ever actually have access to this password until it is actually, in fact, time to, quote unquote, break the glass, right? And this is when we go to the fireproof safe. We actually retrieve the various different components of the password so we can reassemble it so that somebody can actually log in and hopefully recover from, somebody making a conditional access policy go wrong or something like that. And it really should only be used in a true emergency. And because of that, it should have pretty stringent monitoring on it. There should be high severity alerts that should notify your SecOps immediately if this account ever logs in, because again, nobody should actually have the password unless things are really bad.
Great point, Scott. And so right here, it's saying exclude my admin account. And, that's just like, okay, we're just making sure if that was my break glass account, I shouldn't be using it for this, but, it would exclude it. Also, you can see by default, it says report only. So now we can just set this to report only and say, I understand this will not impact because it's only reporting. We were talking about maybe you want to do monitor only at first. And but if we did want to exclude it, we would come in here under exclude, and under users and groups, we would go and check that. So maybe we had a group that would have 2 break glass accounts, or just the one admin account and so forth, but we do not. And so I will click on create because sorry, I uncheck that. And so now I'll click on create, and now I have another one that'll say require MFA for administrators. And one good point, well, many good points, but one I want to kind of elaborate on that Scott mentioned was the notifications of that. And so let me pull this window over here, and here's what I did. I set up a notification, in my log analytics. So these log analytics, I'll click on this condition, and it's a simple query: sign in logs, reject user ID where user ID equals, and that is the identification. So as soon as the threshold is greater than 0, so as soon as someone logs in, and I want this to run every 5 minutes, I'm going to send notifications. And those notifications will be an email and text messages, and even the subject line, global admin has logged on. So there's, you can even do the severity, maybe I want this to be a severity 4, and set up all of those things so that, I will get notified, or multiple people will get notified whenever that happens. And here I'll open up one I did earlier, logged in here, say, monitor alert, global admin notification, start time, and so forth. Even kind of tells me the query and the user ID that, okay, now, someone actually used that break glass account, for that. And so we want to take action. Okay, so back to here. All right, let me pull up this one. So kind of go through some of the other conditional access policies, that we recommend. Another one is sign-in risk. And so with this one, we're going to say if your sign-in risk is medium or high, require MFA. Require MFA for sign-in risk medium or high. And so once again, I want this to be all users. If I have a break glass, maybe I'll put that on there. I can say all cloud applications, and then under the condition. So user risk is, hey, we detected your password on a dark web. Sign-in risk is more about impossible travel or locations or things like that, and then I'll say if it's medium or high, then, require MFA, for that. And so that'll be another one, we want to create. And so then we'll go ahead and click create. And so, that brings up another instance that we're talking about is user risk. And so we'll come up with a new policy, and that is require password change. So if that was user risk is high, and so once again, we'll select all users, all cloud apps. Condition is user risk. So if it's high, and this is a newer feature, then we want to require password change. And as you saw, as I checked that box, it automatically required MFA also. So that will be part of the process to be able to do the password change requirement also. So I'll select that one. Once again, I get the warning. Everything's in report only mode. And I'll go ahead and click create. And so another good one that a lot of people use, and I have 2 more to do, is a block access. And this is a very popular one. And we'll say block access by location. And so here, all users, all cloud apps, under my conditions, I'll say location, and I'll say any location, but I want to exclude trusted locations. Now, trusted locations, obviously that would be your internal office or any place that you identified in trust. Now, when it says trusted location, that's the external IP address. Now, you can't just put 192.168, or else you go to log in from anybody's home network and come in as a trusted location. It's the external IP address that you hit on the website. An easy way to do it is, I think you just type, what's my IP address? And I usually just click this one, and it pops up and tells you, that's the IP address. So now we'll say require MFA. So what we're doing here is any user, any cloud app, under the conditions of location, we'll say require MFA. But if you remember, we excluded the trusted location. So if I'm on a corporate office, maybe I logged in inside the corporate office, I might have had Windows Hello for Business, whatever, it's not going to require MFA. But, if I'm away from the office, then it will require MFA for that. So I'll select that one, and then click create. Now, a couple more I wanted to touch base on is what you do for maybe you're very conservative on or new to moving to the cloud. Maybe Office 365, is your first forte jumping into the cloud. And so you want a policy to only allow Office 365. And so what we would do is block access, except Office 365. Okay. And so what we'll do here now is we're not going to select all, or we can select all, but what we'll do is, once again, we'll exclude the directory roles. And so I would go and select, all the key directory roles that I, talked about earlier. I'm not going to go through all of them. So I want to exclude those. Those are the ones I'll still need to get to Azure MFA and administrators. We already have MFA on top of those. And so now we'll say all cloud apps, but we'll exclude Office 365. And then, so once we do that, we can also do the trusted location. So under conditions, we'll say configure any location, but we're going to exclude all trusted locations. And then under grant, we're going to block. Now that's somewhat of a dangerous one there. Whenever you do a block access or you're choosing all users or all cloud apps, you really want to be careful. Make sure you're excluding, your break glass account, or it's a small group you want to test with first. But let's kind of step through this real quick. So what we're saying is all users minus the admin, it's supposed to be more nodes, I just didn't click them all. Going to any cloud app, we're going to exclude Office 365. Any location, but we're going to exclude the trusted location. So if you're internal, hey, we'll let you, or if you had a trusted location, and then we're going to block, access for that. And so, that, a lot of times companies says, hey, we just want them to have email to start out with. Hey, we're new to this. We don't want to have this get out of hand or anything. We want to, take baby steps and so forth. And so then we'll create that one. Now, what you would want to do for that is we'll create a new policy. And this one will be Office 365 compliant device. So what we're saying here is for all the users, and obviously we would exclude, we'll say all users, but we'll exclude the admins again. And so I would come in here and just pick all. I would really go through and do them all. And under cloud apps, I would pick the specific Office 365 app. So I just want Office 365. And then what I'll do from there is grant but require MFA and or required device to be compliant, or I could do both. So as you see here, if I want to require one of the selected, is the device compliant? That means is it fully enrolled in Intune mobile device management and it checks all the compliant checks? Yes. Then you could get in. If it's not, then we'll require MFA. Or I could say I want both. Is your device compliant? Nope, you can't get in. I don't care if you MFA or not, and so forth. So if you want to be real secure and you're giving the devices to your end users and you have a mark compliant, you can require all or one of those, and so forth. And so now what I'll do is I'll create that policy.
And just real quick, Paul, just for something that really helped me in this space is that I know historically, whenever you're building a set of policies like this, there's usually, think about it from a firewall standpoint, right? There's like a deny all or a block all, and then you start building your exceptions on top then that, effectively builds your allow list. That's one thing that in my mind, conditional access works differently is that it's kind of open, right? Everybody's allowed in by default, and you actually end up having to create policies that define then both your deny route as well as your actual allow. So you actually have to build both sides of the coin here, as opposed to just everything's off and then you start building exceptions.
Yeah, that's a good point. And a lot of people, they'll start with that block access, and then just add the exceptions to that. And that brings up another good point on exceptions. So now I have Office 365 with a compliant device. And so Scott calls and says, hey, my device crashed, I'm rebuilding it, I really need to get in and access something. I need to bypass this this conditional access policy. So the recommended practice for this is you find your users and you put an exclude. And so now I have the exclude for directory roles, but maybe I'll have an exclude for, I think I have an exception for require MFA. So now, okay, your exception to require MFA, if you're in that group, we won't require you MFA, and so maybe you can still access it, or if we had one for a compliant device. But the trick here is you don't want to forget about that account. And so now what we can do is we'll set up something as part of our identity governance. And so with identity governance, we can do access reviews. And so with access reviews, we can check to see who's in this group. So I have an access review for this group here. So I added Scott to this group. And so, I defined who are the reviewers and what are the settings, exception, all guest users require MFA. I want notification, reminders. Reviewer requires, to have a response. So if I don't respond, what'll happen? How often does this run? So once a week, is the maximum. I'll let this go. Or it says, hey, Scott, do you still need to be in this group to bypass MFA? And then when completed, if a reviewer doesn't respond, I can have them remove access. Or I could say no change or approve access. So I have different options, to do that. And everything is scheduled. You can see your review history and your audit logs. And what that happens is I don't stick Scott in there and then just forget about it. And so now he doesn't have to use MFA anymore or be on a compliant device or whatever it is. It's coming back time and time and saying, hey, do you still need this? Should we still be approving this? And if we forget about it at most, it's only 1 week that, he would bypass that security, for that. And, we talk about, I'm actually going to jump over to another tenant. Let's see, that has more information. Let me pull over this tenant, because the one I was showing you was a new tenant. But another really neat thing is the sign-in logs. So I want to know what's going on, in the last 24 hours or, the last month, or I could do a custom interval time. And so I can see which applications, and so access the portal. And this gives you a wealth of information on the date, the request, multi-factor authentication, it was successful, the user, the ID, the tenant, everything you need. And what's the location, the device information, is it compliant, is it managed? The authentication details, it was first factor required, claimed in a token. And then, your conditional access policies. And this is really neat because it shows that highly regulated require MFA was applied. These policies were not applied. We had one customer, that didn't click the seatbelt. One of their executives, they got hacked. And they were so upset because, hey, we had a conditional access policy in there, but they forgot to add the user to the group, or someone removed him, or something happened, and they weren't notified, or they didn't know, and it didn't apply. So they had the tools, they didn't buckle the seatbelt, for that. And it'll go through and talk about which ones were applied, which ones were report only. So I did not log in from a compliant device, but it was report only, so it showed as a failure, for that. And any additional information from here. And so you get all this information on what's going on for your different users and applications, and let's see what's Dawn doing here and so forth. And you can export this data, and you could set, add different filters, or I want to, hone in on one user. And so that user starts with DAW. Click apply. All right, and so here's what's going on with Dawn Jones, for that. Another thing is, we kind of talk about in conditional access is insights and reporting. And so take a second for this to build out, but it kind of talks about, and you can obviously download this, break down per condition and sign-in status and, Windows 10, unmanaged, browser, locations, sign-in risk, sign-in details. You know, do you want to start an investigation and things like that? You know, you get a ton of information, you know, on the insights and reporting. You know, you can also, here, I think I'll just, you know, kind of show you how can contact support and, you know, sign in, like, what's your problem? And we give you guidance on how to fix some of the key problems. You know, we even have a virtual assistant here and so forth. And then finally, we can get to is risky users and sign-in. This is one of our premium features where, you know, okay, this user here, that's a risky user. So what's going on? You know, it's a low-level risk, recent, you know, I guess risk history, unfamiliar sign-in property. So Dawn logged in for a machine that she never logged in before, we didn't know about, and so forth. And so, you know, we can reset the password, confirm user compromise, dismiss, block, you know, investigate if we're using Azure, ATP, which is now Microsoft Defender for identities. So it's quite a bit of feature and functionality that kind of goes into that you'll be able to use to help you find information. And then last, my favorite tool is the what if tool. And this is the one that, you know, you really should use quite often. So what if Alex signed in? And click on what if. And it shows, here's what will happen. You know, if he signed in, you know, these would apply, these policies would not apply. And, you know, reasons why they would not apply, well, he's not in those groups, or he is in these groups and it would apply those. We'd even break it down, well, that's just all cloud apps. What happened if, you know, Alex tries to log into, and you know what, I think I have a third-party app in here, Salesforce. All right, so let me select Salesforce. It's not just Microsoft applications. You know, we'll do what if. All right, well, he'll require MFA. You know, he'll block, you know, legacy authentication. You know, MFA for non-trusted locations. You know, require compliant PC. And then here's the policies that would not be applied to it, and so forth. And you could drill down, what about this IP address, or this country, or this device platform? You know, maybe it's different when you log in from a Mac than iOS than Windows. You know, which client apps? Is it a browser? Is it a modern mobile app or desktop app using modern auth, or is it using older, you know, legacy authentication? What's the device state? When you see device hybrid AD joined, that means the device is joined in your local domain, but it's registered with Azure AD, so we know about it. Is that device compliant or not? And what's your sign-in risk? You know, so you can look at it, and what's your user risk? You know, you could look at all these different things. So this what if tool saves a lot of headaches. And, you know, that company I was talking about, you know, they would have ran, if their executive was Alex, you know, they could have ran this tool and say, okay, you know, these policies are not being applied. You know, do they need to be applied for it, and so forth.
Hey, Paul.
Right.
I have a question that's been posted that I do not know the answer to, so I'm going to throw it out there and see if you know. So the question is, MFA adoption is low because P1 only supports interrupt mode. P2 is needed for managed mode registration. Any plans to support registration with P1? Can you clarify? Do you know what this person means by managed mode registration?
I don't know what the managed mode registration is, but I think what he's talking about was if you use the identity protection, you were able to pick which users you wanted to require MFA registration. So what we do now is you can create a conditional access policy, and when you go to users, let's see, user actions, register security information. And once you do that, now you can pick by group, and it'll force the users to register for MFA and also single sign-on password reset at the same time. And so before, you know, most people would do is once a policy is applied that would require MFA, it'll walk you through the process to register for MFA at that time. But you could, since, what they wanted to do was send to a group of people and say, okay, force them to register for MFA even before we send a policy to require MFA. And before, that's where it was a feature of the P2 license, but now you can do it under user actions here, register security information, for that. And I think that's answers the question. If not, I would need some more clarification.
Sounds great. I will keep you posted if something more pops up.
All right. Well, that's all I had for today. You give a few minutes back if there are no other questions, or answer anything else dealing with conditional access, that people might have. What I can do is also, there's a very good link. Let me find it real quick. And I'll put this in the IM chat. Can you share that out? Scott, if I put it in here. But it's a,
yes.
Here's a very good link, and I'll step through this real quick. And this is our common identity and device access policies. And the way you read this chart is your baseline for PCs, this is Windows and Mac, and your baseline for iOS and Android. Require MFA when sign-in risk is medium or high. We kind of stepped through that one. Require approved applications. And once again, that's only for iOS and Android. I didn't select that one during the presentation, but that is a very good one that you should set for your baseline. Obviously, you want to block, clients that don't support modern authentication. You can turn that on in report only mode, and you'll see if any clients are trying to connect that way, which will make the decision easier and say, okay, Scott, I see you're connecting from this, unsupported version of Office from 2000. Can't do that anymore. Require compliant PC. That's the one I did when we talked about connecting just to Office 365. So you would block all except for Office 365. Azure identity protection and user risk policy. That's where if we detect your user risk is high, we're going to force that password change. Now, Intune device compliance. I didn't go into this, but you should have a device compliant policy for each OS. iOS, one for Android, one for Windows 10, one for Mac OS. And then in Intune app protection policy, you take it a step further and say, not only do we require approved apps, but we require data protection policy to be applied to those applications. Now we'll go to the next one, which is the sensitive. And that is, you want to require MFA when the sign-in risk is low, medium, or high. Baseline is medium or high, but low, medium, or high. You want to require a compliant PC and mobile device. And that one gets a little tricky because, I work for Microsoft. Microsoft gives me a Surface Laptop 3. It's their device. They have full rights to wipe that device whenever they want. But I pay for my iPhone. And, if I took, my kid's birthday pictures on an iPhone and someone from Microsoft accidentally, wiped my device, my wife's going to be mad, if we lose those pictures. And so that's a decision every company needs to make on, requiring compliant PCs and mobile devices. And we talk about, all of these just keep flowing down. Now you get to highly regulated. Well, you're going to require MFA always, and that's kind of where I was talking about MFA for administrators, MFA for Azure management, and so forth, and then, apply additional layer 3 app data protection policies. That's where you could even restrict cut, copy, paste, or detect certain OS versions, or even at launch and things like that, for those things. And then, and this is a really neat, I'll show you another link here and I'll post it in there. But, and it kind of breaks down what happens when you add teams. Now, how does that change? What is added, in red, that's kind of what's added for teams. And I'll put that one in the chat also. so we could share it with everyone. Then we add Exchange Online. Now, obviously we'll block Active Sync, but that was already blocked with Modern Auth. And then now we add SharePoint. And so it adds these here. And we'll talk about, and you can click on one of these and it'll bring you right to drill down a little further on how to set that policy, using different baselines and things like that. But this is one of the best things. Oh, and the one policy I forgot to mention is guest users and external users. And this is so important. I'm going to go and create one more policy, one more conditional access policy. Because a lot of times people forget about this policy, and it's require MFA all guest and external users. And so here we're going to say all guest and external users. We want to require, all applications, and we'll require MFA. And one thing to mention is if you have a compliant device policy, you have to exclude guest and external users, because when they come in, they'll never come in under a machine that you have marked as compliant. It doesn't apply, to them. They'll always be marked as not compliant. Even though their device might be compliant in their tenant, the compliance rules that they have in their tenant, they don't translate over. Even if they are identical, it wouldn't translate over, to your tenant and so forth. All right. All right, any other questions?
Nope, I was able to answer the others. Yeah, I think this was really good. At the end of the day, from my perspective, I do always like to think about this, kind of through the lens of risk. So whenever you're, looking at rolling out these conditional access policies, if you aren't comfortable laying something down broad, to the point on the policy earlier where you were targeting those admins and making sure that they have to have MFA in place. Again, it's your most risky users, those users that have access to a significant amount of business value. If they have the opportunity, the ability to hit the big red button to cause a whole bunch of damage, or exfiltrate a whole bunch of sensitive data, those users are the ones that need to have the additional controls at the very least implemented, such that you have those protections in place.
Good stuff. It's a scary thing out there, and once again, it was a 99%. MFA mitigates against those identity attacks.
Yeah. So I get that sometimes for some of our organizations, it's difficult to roll out. But at the same time, identify those users that are sensitive, and don't let the C-levels, bully their way out of potentially, having all of the controls, right? Because those are the targeted users, specifically, because they're the ones that have, again, access to a significant amount of business value.
Yep. Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul. This is great stuff. And we will make the recording available on the HLS blog here shortly. So thanks everyone for joining. Great questions. And of course, if there are any follow-ups, feel free to reach out to either Paul or myself. We'll make sure that our contact information is included. So thanks again.
Bye.